Hello everyone. I still did not get music ready for this week. I know, very impressive stuff. Um, this is going to be the 6.3 and 6.4 episode. I will be alone once again, unfortunately, but so it goes. Looks like 2 plus 4 times 5 is already here. And we've got the speed draw going. We can see that Vic drew Aisha this week, Brian's sister. Let's see here. Oh, I've got to set it to live chat. Got to make sure we can see all the spicy chats coming in from people such as 2 plus 4 times 5. We want this stream to have swears in, you know. We're big kids. As the audience participation reminder, I want to let everyone remember the question was, do you think the Undersiders should take the proposed job? So yeah, we'll talk about that at the end. And then for the themes of this week, I thought Taylor's general compartmentalization and sort of self-delusion are on display here. The way that she convinces herself, I gotta turn him in. I just gotta. Even increasing her time frame to be sooner. And then let's see here. Guess I didn't really have any more themes other than that, but I thought that those were fine. Looks like Greg is here. Hey, Greg. But I think I'm just going to start into it. 6.3. We open the chapter with Taylor opening the front doors for Brian. We get some good environmental details as she really starts to notice how sterile of an environment the building is. Nothing's out of place, with no noise filling the silence, and this is also caused by her awkward lack of conversational skills. Taylor thinks to herself, I didn't get distracted staring at how hot Brian is. I was just distracted when I noticed how much I had been staring at him because he was so hot. Did I remember to mention that Brian's hot? Yeah, her thoughts are, yeah, they betray her a bit. And then, let's see here. She's sort of mentally kicking herself for not being able to keep it together in a conversation with him, and manages to ask him which floor that they need to push for the elevator. They get up to the 4th floor, and not knowing what to expect, she's surprised by Brian's apartment. The atmosphere in the apartment seems to be a lot more like soft and inviting than she had expected. There's like a corduroy couch and stuff, and everything's like tan and like gray and just sort of like, and there's like a sepia picture of trees or something in the hallway. Oh yeah, it's sepia tone. She thought that he might have the bachelor starter kit, as I call it, with the whole black leather and chrome. And like harsh edges and stuff. But instead, I'll pull out this little quote. Softness of the colors, the little jars with stones, water and bamboo on the kitchen counter, or the sepia tones picture of jar with little stones, water and bamboo on the kitchen counter, or the sepia tone pictures of trees in the front hall. The place gave me a sense of ease. Wow, I am not reading quotes well today. Have to work on that. Greg says, I think she's influenced by his black leather costume. Yeah, it could be. But I also understand the exact look she was mentioning. I was like, yeah, I've seen that on the television. This place is pretty upscale. She says that the high ceilings leave the place nearly 2 stories high, aside from the walled-off bedroom and bathroom that are only 1 story high, with a second-story bedroom above them. That's like Brian's bedroom. As they take their shoes off, Taylor takes the sweatshirt off as well, like she promised Lisa, and she instantly feels self-conscious and gets them started on building the furniture. They spend about 20 minutes building some shelves that don't seem to want to be put together. They need one of them to hold the stuff together while the other adds pieces to it, or it starts to fall apart like right away. Um, They get some soda out of the fridge, and after that, to cool off, they need a hot bath to cool off, as Greg would say. And then they work on the kitchen table, which is another whole thing. It's apparently much more of an annoying deal than the shelving. Hey, Vale. We got our classic 3 here. If Vic shows up, we'll have a full house. And then, so if they don't hold it just right when they're screwing in the bolts, they had to, start over. So at some point, Brian needs to make some minor adjustment to a table leg, and he puts his hand on Taylor's hand without looking over. The contact made me feel like someone had plucked a guitar string that ran from the top of my head down through the middle of my body. A deep thrum, weird sentence. A deep thrum deep inside me that couldn't be heard, only felt. It has to be pretty deep to be deep thrum deep inside. And yeah, it is the IKEA chapter. I almost wrote in my script, then didn't at one point. These IKEA-ass furniture pieces. But I guess now it had made it into the script. There's about a page of awkward comedy interactions at this point. She uses her go-to move of being all quiet and still so that she doesn't embarrass herself by doing something stupid. But then she's stuck thinking about the crushing silence and her inability to start a conversation. After a little bit more light body contact, arm on shoulder, again, it prompted an almost elemental reaction from my body. Was this intentional? Was he signaling interest through casual physical contact? Or was I assigning meaning to something coincidental? Yeah, she's freaking out, man. Which I guess is what I wrote next. Taylor is all but freaking out, man. Their arms aren't even touching anymore, but Brian's hot face is right next to her face. She's still helping put together the furniture, but her programming is locking up more and more. He asks, "Want to grab me the nut?" And aside from the obvious innuendo, she has to drop it to his hand to avoid the body contact. Even without touching more, she's gotten to the point where she's unconsciously holding her breath. She's clearly spiraling, thinking about how much furniture they have left to build, and he tells her, "Relax. You're allowed to breathe." 2 plus 4 times 5 says, Taylor used social awkwardness. It's super effective. Bill says, I bet this chapter was so fun to write. I would have channeled my inner 10-year-old finding all the humor. Oh, definitely. Oh, for sure. Taylor says, I laughed lightly at the realization I was holding my breath, which resulted in a nervous, chuckling exhalation that only added to the awkwardness I was feeling. Good job. So Brian asks Taylor if she's okay, and thinking so fast that she must have a thinker power, she says with her eyes averted, I get nervous when I'm close to people. I think, maybe I have bad breath, or maybe I have BO, and I wouldn't be able to tell because it's mine, so I hold my breath to be safe. I don't know. Taylor should be put in the Flirting Hall of Fame for this one. A true legend. She mentally roasts herself and thinks she'll be cringing about this one for years or even decades. Vale says, would you prefer if we don't make comments about things like gently holding nuts while screwing? No, it's perfectly all right. Don't worry, Vale. You can say any interesting comments that you have, and if they're completely out of pocket, I'll just read them to myself and not to the stream. Um, um, yeah, it's on theme for the chapter. Indeed. Um, but the fun doesn't stop there. Brian, no doubt trying to defuse the situation, leans in and he smells her. Nope, you smell nice. If I'd been a cartoon character, I was pretty sure that was the point where I'd have steam shooting out of my ears, or I'd be melting into a puddle. Instead, I went with my first instinct once more and went very still. I became aware of a heat on my face that must have been a furious blushing. Um, Greg says, I at least have chat on live so I can read all the quality nut-based comments. 2 plus 4 times 5 says, if I stay perfectly still, maybe he won't see me. It was a perfect plan. Um, yeah. Um, right as this is all happening, someone arrives at the apartment and opens the door with a key. Who could it be? For a moment, Taylor thinks Brian's girlfriend has arrived, but then recognizes that it's actually his sister. We get our introduction to Brian's sister Aisha and some pretty classic judgy Taylor mixed in with horned up teen Taylor. We end up with um, it's like you could look at a Mercedes and say that it was a beautiful work of art, even if you weren't someone who paid much attention to cars. Along the similar lines, when you saw a Mercedes with a cheap flame decal pasted around the wheels and a tacky homemade spoiler stuck on the back, it was painful and disappointing on a fundamental level. That was what I felt looking at Aisha. Ooh, oh my god, going in for the burns. She was beautiful, as feminine as Brian was masculine, with high cheekbones, a long neck, and even though she was 2 or 3 years younger than me, she already had breasts larger than mine. I could be convinced to chop off a finger for legs, a waist, and hips like hers. Damn, this family had good genes. You just needed one look at Aisha to know she was going to be drop dead gorgeous when she had finished growing up. All that said, though, she had a streak of hair bleached, and some of that bleached hair had been dyed into a stripe of purple. It was as though she had gone out of her way to look trashy, with ripped denim shorts over neon green fishnet leggings, and a strapless top that I would hesitate to even call underwear. Any envy I felt toward her was accented by an almost offended feeling, as far as how she was spoiling what she'd been naturally given. Taylor's just jelly. Let's see here. Aisha is painful and disappointing on a fundamental level, says 2 plus 4 times 5. Hearing Taylor say that was painful and disappointing on a fundamental level. Oh, man. Yeah. Gotta take a second to take a drink of water. So then, right away, the first thing Aisha does is start giving Taylor shit, basically. Giving her weird looks and kind of making fun of her for blushing. Then Aisha's social worker walks in and gives a more clearly defined look of disapproval. Taylor gets embarrassed at what the scene might look like and puts her sweatshirt on to be less exposed. The social worker, Mrs. Henderson, thought Brian was going to be ready for her to show up, then realizes that Aisha had moved the timing earlier without telling Brian. Aisha's a total chaos agent and isn't concerned by what's happening. I would even say that messing with Brian and Taylor is a bit of a treat for her here. Vale says, Taylor thinks everyone is better than her. Seeing someone who is demonstrably actually better than her to this extent is jarring to her normal mindset of having to find reasons why. Yeah. Brian apologizes to Miss Henderson, and she says that she could reschedule, but they'd have to look to do it on the weekend because she already scheduled something in the original inspection time slot. Brian asks if she'll look past the uncompleted furniture and do the inspection now. If you're sure, what about your companion? Blush intensifies. Taylor is worried that her infinite blushing will give a worse impression of whatever was happening. She's a friend. She was helping me out. Taylor, I'm not sure how long this will be. I don't want to waste your time, but I'd feel bad if you left so soon after coming all the way here. If you want to stick around and take it easy, I could give you a ride back after. Taylor goes against all her instincts and stays around. She mentally claims to not know why she's staying. Then Brian smiles and she's like, "Oh, yeah, right, that's it. It's Brian. That's why I'm staying." But upon her staying, Henderson is prompted to ask why Taylor isn't in school right now. She says she's staying home from school because she got hit by one of the blasts and has a concussion. And Henderson hits her with some powerful and accurate sass, to which Taylor has no retort. Brian moves things along and tries to point out that this must be a good thing for Henderson because it'll allow her to check the apartment even before the last minute scramble to make everything perfect. She doesn't seem too impressed by this, but they step out onto the balcony to talk about the schools in the area of town, leaving Taylor and Aisha alone in the living room. Taylor tries to smile over at Aisha, who's sitting on the kitchen counter, and when she does, she only gets a glare in return. So Taylor tries to busy herself with any tasks she can find to prep the second table leg. "So, you're on my brother's team." Taylor plays it all right, but I still imagine in my head her being like, "Team? What team?" Vale says, "Brian, could you hand me the bolts, please? Oh, one at a time, and slowly, because I don't want to drop them." Aisha doesn't buy it, and and says that Taylor's playing dumb. Taylor proceeds to play dumb. We get a "right" from Aisha, and she waits a moment before saying, "Look, I know you're on his team. Process of elimination. You have to be the bug girl." Taylor manages to shake her head, and Aisha starts talking all about it. Brian had told her because he knew that siblings and children of parahumans are more likely to also get powers, which I think is pretty widely known even to non-parahumans because of people like New Wave, but especially in a city like Brockton Bay where these public figures are like a whole family of capes with sort of aligned powers. After she knew Brian was a cape, it was pretty easy for her to put the pieces together when Brian was busy and when different cape activity was reported. The clincher was the Ruby Dreams casino robbery. Brian wasn't able to bluff his way out of confirming he was Gru when she confronted him about it. Hoping to throw her off balance, I put the most convincing wide-eyed expression of shock on my face that I could manage. "You're saying that your brother is a supervillain?" A masterful play by Taylor. Let's see from Aisha's reaction how it turned out. "Yeah, and I'm saying you are too. Why else would my brother be hanging out with you?" Taylor feels the words as they were intended to be felt, but is at least spared having to reply as the other two come back inside from the balcony. Mrs. Henderson is talking about the waiting list for the school Aisha would need to attend in this area, which we can kind of assume is Arcadia High, since Brian mentions her starting 9th grade at the time of the transfer. And we know that in this school district, high school is grades 9 through 12, since Taylor's backstory at Winslow also involves her being in 10th grade in her second year. Brian mentions that this would separate Aisha from the bad influences where she's going to school now, and Aisha gives him the finger. 2 plus 4 times 5 says Aisha, troll face. After all, this is set in 2011. Yeah, this is set in the peak Rage comic era. What a sad day for internet culture. The caseworker goes to see Brian's room, and Aisha starts messing with Taylor again, threatening to shout about Gru and Ladybug. Taylor makes sure that Henderson is out of earshot, looking up at the stairs, and tells Aisha that yelling about them being supervillains is a lose-lose situation. But Aisha counters that she's got nothing to lose, and people already think she's crazy. Taylor asks what she thinks she has to gain from doing it, and Aisha responds with, "Come on," she wheedled. "Just admit it." Taylor's getting, pretty shook at this point, to be honest. Not knowing what to say, and again, being grateful that Brian and Henderson have come back into the room. Miss Henderson heads into Aisha's new room, and Brian tells Taylor that she doesn't need to worry about working on the table alone. She tells him that it's a nice distraction, and he apologizes and says they're almost done. He was right, as there's not enough time for Aisha to start another line of questioning or another line of roasting before Henderson is back, and after looking at the kitchen and the bathroom for a few moments, then she has Aisha step onto the balcony so she can talk to Brian privately. She asks if Taylor should step out on the balcony as well, and Brian says that he doesn't have anything to hide. Henderson starts by saying that this is better than most of the places that she checks out, but still she has concerns. She gives a good list of things that she thinks he's doing well. In many respects, this is the sort of situation I wish for with most of my cases. But then she moves on to say that she thinks Brian let his personality dominate the space, and that he needed to work with Aisha to make the space feel more like her own as well. When I first read this, I thought that she was being too harsh on Brian, focusing a lot on this one thing after listing all the stuff he's doing right. But reading it this time, I definitely felt more like she wasn't leaning away from Brian and toward their mother in the custody thing. She was just trying to drive home her point to Brian, and given Aisha's personality and her history, that assessment doesn't seem too far off to me. So I think she's pretty spot on. While this conversation's going on, Taylor gets a notification on her cell phone. It's on vibrate, so she isn't going to check it until the home assessment is over. Vale says she's trying to help Brian. Aisha is going to be a failure otherwise. Yeah. No, I definitely feel like that. Brian asks if this is fixable, and she tells him that if he works with Aisha to bring some of her personality to the decorations and so forth, that he'll be fine. Henderson says that she'd be willing to come back for another inspection after he's had time to make some changes. She's clearly wanting to give him the benefit of the doubt and helping him improve his chances to get custody of Aisha. I think she's a really cool one-off character. We never see her again after this, but I feel like we learn a lot about her in this really small scene. Her high standards aren't coming from any negative place. It's pretty clear that she wants Aisha to actually have a better home life and to have a stable environment to live in. So, she apologizes about the unexpected meeting and offers this one time to take Aisha to what sounds like the equivalent of a scared straight program because of all the suspensions she's been getting from school. Brian says that Aisha would miss her afternoon movie after all, and then, "Looks like," the caseworker smiled conspiratorially. "Keep it up, Mr. LeBourne. Aisha's lucky to have you." Which is more or less when the meeting ends. And this improves Brian's mood as well. Once they're gone, Taylor tells Brian that Aisha knows about the Undersiders, and she does this as she gets her phone out. "Shit, sorry," he made a pained face. "If I thought you'd be running into her, I would have given you a heads up. You didn't say anything?" Pretending not to know what the hell she was talking about, for all the good it did, or pretended not to know what the hell she was talking about for all the good it did. "Is this going to be a problem?" Um, Brian explains that he didn't think she would be this brazen about it, and he really doesn't think she's going to tell just for the sake of telling. But she was probably doing it to mess with Taylor once she was pretty sure that Taylor was actually on the team. Taylor's still worried, but she kind of lets it pass because Brian is already stressed out from the inspection. Um, and then the notification was from a text from Lisa, which reads, sorry to interrupt Smoochfest. You two need to hurry back. Shit is going down." The only thing that she um, did to like shorten a word was leave the O out of sorry. It just seems so crazy to like shorten that by one letter and then like not do any others, like using the two numeral for the word two. Oh, Lisa. Um, Embarrassed by Lisa's prodding about the smooch fest and so forth, she deletes the text to make sure Brian can't see it, and she tells him that they need to head back to the loft. He's disappointed that they can't finish putting together the furniture, but they smile at each other, and Taylor says, "Another time." When Brian helps Taylor to her feet, she's still hyper aware of how long they touch for, and is hoping and dreading the possibilities about Brian having feelings for her. This is when she has another one of those like um, moments where she thinks about going to turn in the Undersiders. Even more intense than usual, she suddenly decides that she's going to defect to the Protectorate within the next week. Oh, Taylor. Oh, Taylor. Vale says her power won't let her shorten her sentences. Needs max effect. 2 plus 4 times 5 says Surrey are kind of arranged in a line on the neck or on the keyboard, whereas the O is on the opposite side of the keyboard. All right, I mean, you're kind of right. It's a little silly. Also, I think that she may be on T9. Um, let's see here. Yeah, so that's the last part of my like little chapter summation. But she's really like, mm, I don't know. She's still trying to like keep up this internal facade about like I'm definitely going to turn them in. I'm just an undercover good guy. The only reason I'm hanging out with them is because I need to get information on them. Even though she definitely also knows the clear, real reason. um, but yeah, she doesn't want to get any deeper, and she doesn't think she'll be able to extricate herself if she doesn't go for it in the next week. So it's a whole thing. And as for final chapter thoughts, I don't know. I think this is a really good one. I think that we've talked about like Brian living apart from the other Undersiders, and like his main motivation of his sister, and it's almost like I think it's like the perfect time to introduce this because it does. You don't want to rush it, and these chapters are longer than the previous chapters, so this would have taken like 2 chapters early in the book probably, and like Taylor having an established relationship with the Undersiders by the time he meets Aisha is good. Um, Vale says this chapter really settles in and gets comfortable as much as it can when Taylor is involved with her team on, or with her on the team for real. Yeah, yeah, and like the fact that she's been in the last few chapters like living at the loft and not going home or to school. Um, it's like a whole thing. I think it's really establishing a tone. You're trying to get, or we're trying to get like immersed in her wanting to stay with the Undersiders, which is why she tries to like kick her own ass into gear to decide to leave them, which, I wouldn't turn them in. Yeah, and also, like, having such a good side character who we see for such a small amount of time, and then, yeah, we get some, all our faves. Judgy Taylor. The only thing we don't get is, she doesn't crawl bugs over herself, Where's the bugs? But anyway, I think it's time to move on to, the speed draw for the next chapter art. So between the chapters, they head back to the loft, and just as they're getting inside, a news broadcast is going off. Vale says she is covered in bugs head to toe the whole chapter. They just hide when anyone looks. Yeah, definitely. And she doesn't even think about it because she just does that all the time. She's just always covered in bugs and loves bugs. So the news is going, thanks to a concerted effort by members of Brockton Bay's wards and protectorate teams, the local gang, the ABB, or AZN Bad Boys, has fallen. Taylor and Brian arrive at the loft, and the other three and the dogs are watching the news broadcast. Vista and Clock Blocker essentially stopped a nuke from going off that Bakuda wanted to use to hold the city ransom and escape. I was going to look up how this bomb compared in magnitude to other famous bombs, then I gave up to keep writing more. She was able to make this super bomb with household materials, they say. Fucking tinkers. I'm really, really digging this art. I had, of course, seen the art, but I had not actually watched the speed draw for this one, so that was a fun little thing. And before I move on to the real image, Victoria made a version, or Vic did, that is the censored version for the news, where the double deuce from Bakuda is blurred out. And at first I thought, like, well, she wouldn't have her mask on in the mugshot, and then I thought, wait, maybe she would have the mask on because they don't unmask capes when they turn them in usually. But I mean, there's the real art. We'll stick to real art for now. But yeah, I thought the censored version was funny. 2 plus 4 times 5 says, or Vale says the art is amazing as always. 2 plus 4 times 5 says, I love how Bakuda is doing the OMG lol, that's amazing. And then said, media censorship wins again. Yeah. We can show you the horrific bombings, but we cannot show you middle fingers because that would be offensive. So, the villains pushing the ABB out of other parts of the city and into the docks helped the heroes capture the remaining ABB and especially Bakuda and the big bomb in a derelict boathouse that's part of that's part of the docks. But the wards really did nail this, and they had some great powers for dealing with this specific situation, between Vista being able to move people around or compress the area of a bomb going off, etc. Lots of tricks like that, to Clock Blocker being able to time freeze stuff to keep it from going off if there was a countdown or something. They were stacked for this mission. And we can see on the thing there's Lung still with no eyeballs. There's Bakuda. Oni Lee was not caught. But we've got Clock Blocker and Vista doing some mugs for the camera. Protectorate efforts successfully lead to arrest and custody of ABB gang leader Lung and accomplice Bakuda. Not live. And then, anyway, then the news broadcast goes on to say that right after the ABB capes were arrested, a bunch of Coil soldiers attacked Med Hall's main corporate building, which, as we know, is the main front for Kaiser and the Empire 88. So Empire 88 was attacking them. In the news, they say, like, which attracted the attention of local villains, Empire 88. But we know. And then they are kind of having like a multi-fronted street warfare battle. The news says there have been 6 major incidents of fighting in the last hour. And, you know, I can assume that these are running gun battles because, like, you know, these Empire 88 guys, they're real assholes. And the Coil soldiers, they got them purple lasers and just your bog standard machine guns. Lisa mutes the TV and starts telling them the important bits, probably pulling some outside knowledge she's picked up on as well. The travelers did 2 heists in an hour. They hit an art gallery and an airport. Not sure what you steal specifically at an airport, but maybe there was a different art gallery at the airport. Or a diamond store. Coil and Empire 88 are both just like blitzing each other as much as they can. The merchants are attempting a looting spree. They're swelling in numbers and they are not organized. 2 + 4 × 5 says airplane peanuts. It's true. They need to steal all the remaining packets of peanuts. It's the only true fortune you can find in an airport. I was thinking to myself, like, planes are really expensive, but how would you sell... Where would you move a plane to sell it? Who's going to fence the plane for you? There aren't that many planes in the world, so when one is bought and sold, it's often noticed. I pulled some quotes here. So the ceasefire is over, I spoke. Weren't things supposed to get better with the ABB gone? Why did I feel partially responsible for this? It's like everyone was poised on the starting line, ready to move the instant the gun fired, Alex said. Except us, Brian pointed out. Lisa tells them that they might have some opportunities yet. Their boss sent a message a few minutes after the street warfare started up downtown. That message was why she called Taylor and Brian back to the loft. She says this may be their biggest job yet. Lisa starts outlining the situation. Morale is down, the city is spooked, and things aren't calming down the way people were hoping they would. The fact that we all dodged a bullet with this super bomb thing, it didn't help. Lisa starts pulling something up on her laptop while she tells them about how it's bad PR for the heroes and the villains... Or bad PR for the heroes, that the villains did most of the work, taking down the ABB. So the mayor and the city are holding a fundraiser/celebration to mark the end of the bombing campaign. The Protectorate and the wards, and the PRT, and the cops will all be at this event. She shows them the site that she's been pulling up on the computer. It's got information about the event, which is happening tonight. Aside from various city-aligned capes and so forth, there will also be rich people and expensive ticket buyers alike. The boss wants us to, quote, embarrass them, unquote. Taylor can tell by Alec and Rachel's reactions that they've already heard Lisa's pitch, and they weren't excited about it. Brian kind of slowly starts chuckling, then laughing, and then it's building up, and Taylor blurts out, "Are you insane? You want us to, what, crash a party, fuck with the people there, then scram before we get ourselves arrested by the half the fucking heroes in Brockton Bay?" "Basically," Lisa said, raising her hands as if to get me to calm down. And Lisa then corrects that it wouldn't be quite half of the heroes. It'd be more like a third. Taylor says something that probably hurts Lisa's feelings. No offense, Lisa. I'm fond of you and everything, but you kind of underestimated the number of heroes that would show up at the bank robbery, too. Right in Lisa's weak point. Taylor not thinking she's super awesome. I mean, it's a pretty glaring weak point when you're Taylor. Lisa starts to say something and spool up a counter-argument, but Taylor jumps right into her next point, that they'd be pissing off all the heroes and the cops and the mayor and the DA will probably be there as well. You're aware that if we tried this and any of us got caught, it would pretty much be a first-class trip to the birdcage. Vale says, Taylor just called her stupid. Oh no. Well, it's like a combo platter. She not only kind of called her stupid, but like the fact that it's Taylor specifically bringing up like a past mistake. Like, yeah, that's sad, Lisa. Gonna take a drink of water real quick. So, Brian tells Lisa his vote is also no. He wants to sit back for a bit and let the other groups wear each other down, fighting, and Rachel chimes in saying that she doesn't get the point of attacking the fundraiser. Alec is like, you won't find anyone more willing to get a little crazy than me, but he still agrees with the others. He says it's a lot of risk for what reward? Lisa says that they would be paid by the boss, and there would be other considerations. She thinks this is a test, and that if they can pull this off, they'll prove themselves to the boss. Brian says, maybe it's a test to see if we're smart enough to say no. And, not go to jail. Greg says, Taylor has a point with their track record. Eidolon will be visiting Houston or some nonsense. Yeah. Yeah, because Taylor brings up the fact that, or visiting from Houston. Taylor brings up the fact that heroes were coming in from other cities and stuff. So, like, who knows who could be there, But Brian asks Lisa if they can turn down this mission, and she says they can. Brian tallies 4 votes against with only 1 vote in favor of going. He says it's been democratically decided and starts to offer Taylor that they go back to his apartment and finish putting together the furniture when Lisa cuts him off. 250! 250,000 each. She wanted them to convince them to join, then surprise them with the amount they would be getting. Alec confirms that she's talking about $1.25 million split 5 ways. Like I said, Lisa smiled a little. Biggest job yet. Taylor says this doesn't feel a lot different from the boss paying them to turn themselves in, but Lisa says this is better because they actually have a chance to get away. A very, very small chance, I pointed out. Vale says, by the way, for $250K, I'm in. Just saying. Yeah. Yeah. Let's see here. Lisa says if they do this, they'll be able to prove themselves to the boss and improve their standing in the Cape community. Even have a voice when dealing in the boss's long-term plans. This gives Taylor pause, and she asks to know more. Lisa says, meeting with him, discussing what we do next, and why. Suddenly, Taylor's brain is spinning with the possibilities. Alex says the money solves the problem he had with the job, because it's no longer pointless. The point, I believe he says it's very pointy. Or no, maybe, I think it's worth looking at. It's a funny quote, and I didn't pull it out. $250,000 is pretty pointy. And then Taylor is trying to weigh her options, and she admits to herself that she's been procrastinating and didn't really have a game plan on how to find out more about the boss. Now, I had to make a call. This next section takes like a whole page of writing out her thoughts. It's easy to miss, but because a lot of books just do this without thinking about it, and it kind of like in universe wouldn't make sense for a character to be able to think unlimited thoughts in like zero time. But I actually think Taylor's like low-key thinker power just allows her to think tons and tons in like a split second, and that's part of her like mass multitasking. I'm still like, let's see here. Part of what like convinces me of this is when we see more other characters in like interludes, because most characters, if they were to think for a whole page, like someone would be like, "You're lost in thought." Greg says, "There's a number where I'd be willing to take this kind of risk, but that number has a lot more zeros." Oh boy. Where was I? But yeah. We'll see the other characters get like actually lost in thought and stuff. So in the span of a moment, Taylor thinks over how she doesn't dislike Alec or Rachel, but she really, really likes Lisa and Brian, her first friend since Emma, and the guy she likes and respects. Yeah, those are the only things, Taylor. She's known for a little while now that defecting won't get her respect in the Cape community. She thinks about the things she's already done as a villain, and that she can live with not getting credit and having to try to fly under the radar as a vigilante hero. She hopes she might be able to work out a deal with the wards like Shadow Stalker did, because at this point she feels as though she'd be ready to deal with that sort of situation and team dynamic in a way that she wouldn't have even a few weeks ago. Taylor feels like a super different person than she did when she first went out in costume. Then she starts to worry about the very real consequences that she could face going down that road. What if I got arrested rather than offered probationary membership in the wards? What if the Undersiders escaped and came after me? Or my dad? We finally get to the truth of the matter. She realizes that she would be doing to the Undersiders what Emma had done to her, and the people who are closest to her would become her worst enemies. If I didn't choose, didn't decide, well, if I put it off any longer, the only difference from staying for good by choice would be a fair-sized measure of self-delusion on my part. The time I'd spent with Brian made that clear enough. She speaks up and changes her vote, surprising everyone. She, like even Lisa. Lisa's just, oh! She thinks to herself that the only thing that scares her more than losing her friends is losing herself and hating herself. Even though I think that turning in your friends style option would also lead to that happening. Taylor's worried that if she continues down this path, she might hurt an innocent person as much as she had hurt Lung or Bakuda. She really carries the weight of that toe thing with her for a long time. I think what she did to Lung was a lot more brutal. Totes brutes, some would say. Taylor pep talks herself a little more to keep herself on track. I gotta betray them soon, and to betray them, I gotta do just one last job. Alec asks about this first, saying that she's the last person he expected to be in for this. You're careful, and this is the least careful job we've had yet. She says the vote relies on the idea that they make a good enough plan. Alex still pushes back on this more, saying she always does whatever Brian does. Brian asks if Taylor is sure. She says she's not totally sure, and she's sorry about not backing him up, and then he says that she's a member of the team and gets to have her own voice. Lisa asks what changed her mind, and she skews close to the truth. It bugs Oh my god, bugs. Her to not know who their boss is. And Brian says that he's also curious, but not curious enough to take the job. Rachel says if the scrawny kid is going to do this, that she's not going to back down either. Taylor protests to being called a kid, but not scrawny. She can accept scrawny. And then Lisa intercedes to keep them on topic. They only have a few hours to plan. Brian is in because democracy, and Taylor apologizes again. He says it's okay while putting his hand on her shoulder. She notices he doesn't move it right away. She's still looking for those signs. I asked Lisa, so how do we pull this off? She began outlining a plan. So yeah, another like really great chapter. I think it's really in a good way an echo of the chapter in Arc 3 where they get convinced to do the bank robbery. It's like kind of it's different, and it shows how different Taylor's perspective is from then, because Taylor is kind of the I don't know, she turns around before bitch does, basically. But their dynamic is just totally different now than it was at that point, even though it's a very similar situation with Lisa coming to the rest of the group with a job that they mostly don't want to do. Like this one even being further away from, because like in the first instance, Alec and Rachel were basically in right away and Brian and Taylor were out. And in this instance, everyone was out. Then Alec was like, yes. Then Taylor was like, yes. So really, really good comparatively for those character moments, and how much of a part of the group that Taylor is, you know? Like in the pushback for the bank robbery, it's basically Brian, but in the pushback for this, even though she's still worried, like she's still thinking about like I need to keep my identity secret, but she's giving like direct pushback to this mission, and like more so than Brian even at the first portion. But yeah, I think it's really good that the news broadcast, the like concept of the big job being laid out in front of them as a test. There's a lot of good aspects. Do you guys have any favorite moments in the chapter? I'll throw that to you for a second while I stare at the art and take a sip of water. Okay. Well, I'll read them if they come in later, but seems like no. Well, moving on to the characters section. Oh, Vale says, Tattletale desperately saying 250k each. It caught me by surprise. It caught me by surprise as well. And on like further, you know, future readings of it, like this one, for instance, I always really like that moment. I think it's like funny, and like I like the moment as far as a character moment for Lisa also. It's like a little desperate, you know? And like it's very her to want to be like, and now I'm gonna wow you with this big number, but then like totally miscalculating that it would take the number to get them on board in the first place. Anyway though, yeah, moving on. So in the characters section, I'm gonna start off with the most minor character of the set, Miss Henderson. Like I said during 6.3, I thought she got great characterization, really showed what Wildbow can do already with a background character who we're only going to see once. It really fills in the world to have like such lifelike people, even when it's extras. Bill says, a brilliant writing way to say things have escalated without saying it as well. It's so perfect when close read, and works perfectly when just reading for enjoyment. I agree. It kind of, the back of your mind, excuse me, the back of your mind, the expected heist for the bank was like, they were talking about how the minimum was 25,000. So this is 10 times as much as they expected to get from the bank, and each, not split. Um, and then 2 plus 4 times 5 says, I like how Taylor was like, oh shit, Lisa might be able to find out that I'm planning on betraying them, because that was on my mind for the entire conversation. Yeah, pretty good too. If only she knew. And then Aisha, of course. We meet Aisha for the first time here. We have heard tell of Aisha as Brian's main motivation and the sort of reason he got his powers. So it's clearly like they have like a really, I don't know, they don't have a tight connection per se, but she's still really important and like a driving force in his life, and he wants to improve his connection with her and help her have a better home life and stuff, and get her out of the bad environment of their mom's house. So like it's just like a, from his character standpoint, she's like probably the most important other character in his life. 2 plus 4 times 5 says, oh yeah, Aisha's funny. Vale says, Arc 7, this job pays 2.5 million each. Arc 12, billionaires. AU worm by a bad author. Yeah. It's just like exponential up. At the end, they have more money than all of the rest of the other money combined. No, but yeah, Aisha's introduced. We get like this. I'm gonna go back to her art because we're talking about her. 2 plus 4 times 5 says, turns out their boss is secretly Scrooge McDuck. Yes. He's a Case 53 turned into a duck, and he has made himself Scrooge themed. His power is to the ability to swim through gold. It's a very niche use power. Scion was Mr. Gladly all along. Now we're just getting some deep spoilers about who Mr. Gladly secretly is as a cape, given that he's Scion. I can't believe you'd say that, Vale, on this broadcast. But yeah, Aisha. Taylor mega judges her for the first time they ever meet. Says she thinks that she's going to be a difficult person to deal with. She does think she's very beautiful, and I think that Taylor and Aisha would be like 1.5 years different-ish. Aisha's like 14 or something, and Taylor's like almost 16, so yeah. But Vale says, oh heck, that is a spoiler, isn't it? I'm sorry. I won't mention how critical a role anyone, including Mr. Gladly, plays in the future. But yeah, Aisha clearly sort of pings off of Taylor, doesn't like her, is messing with her from like the very first words out of her mouth, and like continues to really heavily mess with her while Brian is dealing with the caseworker, and yeah, I don't know. We see here that she's a total chaos agent, like I said in the chapter. She doesn't take stuff too seriously, likes to have fun. She's pretty flighty. We hear from the caseworker that she's a serial runaway. So she has a past with that, you know. Um, Because as we know from previous stuff talking about her, she had been living with their mom and then got moved to live with their dad. But by that point, Brian was already living on his own. And then she's just been running away from her dad's house and stuff. But yeah, Aisha's cool. She's going to be in a lot of the story. 2 plus 4 times 5 says, what? Aisha? Aisha's a serial kid. Oh, Runaway. Yeah, Runaway. Definitely a serial killer. Um, and we'll go back to the other art, which just the minor mentions of all the other characters, not pictured here, but Coil's mercenaries and Empire 88 fighting in the streets, all shooting at each other. It's unclear how much his mercenaries battle the actual capes and how much they only fight just regulars. I think some of them could fight some of the capes, but like we've seen that even when you're well trained, like capes can just be like completely overwhelming to deal with. Um, Depending on what their power is. Um, like frankly, I don't even know what they would do to deal with some of the Empire 88 capes. Like what would you do against Fog? I don't know. Run away, I guess. Um, but then the merchants get mentioned. They're the like dumb asshole team of drug dealer villains. And then we got pictured here the two captured ABB villains, your lungs and your Bakuzda. Um, and then you've got your clocks blockers and your Vista. Um, all these types. They say the wards, but they only mention these two by name. Like the others have powers where you could fight people, but these two have real bomb defusal powers. I bet Kid Win was pretty useful too in the whole bomb defusing situation. Um, he certainly didn't turn into a Kid Lose in any case. Um, Going back to the characters, we've got oh man, 2 plus 4 times 5 totally roasts Kid Win. Um, and my dog comes into the room. Probably only to walk out of the room in a second. She looks like she's feeling really Aisha-like, really flighty. Um, um, yeah, moving on to the core cast. Taylor's doing insane mental gymnastics, convincing herself to betray the Undersiders still. Brian is question marks into Taylor, not clear. But we get all the classic character moments of like Brian being the most cautious one in 6.4. A lot of fun stuff. And then Rachel being like brash when the thing that convinces her is that to go to the attack on the gallery is that she wants to like keep up with and stay in front of Taylor in terms of like brazen and boldness. Greg says Taylor would rather think about betraying her friends than about smooching Brian. That is how much of a hormonal disaster that topic is for her. That it just like completely short circuits her brain, and she's like, I gotta betray my friends. Um, and then you get your Alec moments. He's dropping some jokes. He's like, look, I like to go nuts, but I like to go nuts not in jail. Um, Lisa does her thing. A ridiculous text to mess with Taylor. They're all in peak form. I think there's a lot of really good characterization in these two chapters for sure. Wildbow really is getting into. I mean, I don't know. I think they've been really good at this since like arc 3. So, um, just staying on point with the character interactions, really. Um, and then did I miss anybody? We talked about Brian, Rachel, Alec, and Lisa. I think I'm done with the characters. Anybody else got any character thoughts while I start spooling up the very small powers, knowledge, and world building section? As far as powers knowledge, I thought it was interesting that Bakuda could build the nuke-sized bomb, like, that she never like started with something like that. I don't know. Um, Maybe she needed the desperation to fuel her inspiration because powers kind of be like that sometimes. Um, but that's never exactly clear. But with the world building, we've got tons of stuff. We've got the I think it really helps the way Lisa explains the situation about the city's morale and like trying to have good PR before the mayoral election and stuff with the fundraiser, um, and like why they would have this glitzy event while there's basically street warfare going on. So I thought that was really really cool as far as like giving more texture to Brockton Bay, as they always do. I think Brockton Bay is a really good setting. Um, yeah, and I guess that's mostly it for the powers, knowledge, and world building. We didn't super do any cape stuff. 2 plus 4 times 5 says little character detail I noticed about Rachel in 6.4 was she was like, well, I can't look weaker than Taylor in front of my team. Guess I gotta change my vote. Yeah, yeah, definitely. I think it's a really great like micro moment. It comes and goes like super fast. Also, I think it's funny when Taylor is like, look, you can call me scrawny all you want, but I'm no kid. Um, Very silly stuff. Yeah. So, any more character or powers, knowledge, and world building thoughts are welcome. I am going to read this audience participation stuff. Greg says, "Yeah, some real Futurama French energy there." Yeah, it's pretty much like that. So to the question we had, 2 plus 4 times 5 says, one of my favorite things about Wildbow's writing is that even the smallest inconsequential details can be good characterization. Yeah, that's definitely what I'm talking about with the character section. Is I feel like he consistently does it where like every little piece of connective tissue is either like a character moment or a setting moment. Um, is great. I love it. Um, So, yes, the question was, do you think the Undersiders should take the proposed job? 2 plus 4 times 5 had said, I know I definitely wouldn't, but I'm not one of the Undersiders. So maybe they're more experienced than me. I don't know. It just seems like really fucking bad idea unless they have some plan that's 200% guaranteed to work. I can definitely see that perspective. And then, yeah, because I think the stuff Taylor was saying is right, that the consequences for this would be like heightened beyond a normal situation. I don't think they'd go to the birdcage first time or anything because I don't know. People like murder a bunch of people and still don't go to the birdcage sometimes. um, but maybe they would. I don't know. Things are cracking down in their world right now. Vale says they should not do any job for any reason. Every job is a ludicrous risk. But they are villains who take on crazy, ridiculous jobs and love using their powers to find ways to win. They are kids with no real concept of the future or consequences, so they will find ways to take every job. Should they? Never. But they always will. And then this is when Vale had said earlier in the chat, what was it? The whatever it was, the exact line was, to be clear, I would take the job or whatever. Oh yeah. Oh wait, I kept thinking I was finding it, but I'm not. Either way, we remember. We talked about it when it was said. Then Greg says they really shouldn't. The risks are astronomical with so much security and parahuman muscle on the other side. And for what? Cash you don't need and kudos from the boss? And this is off the heels of the bank robbery. Pulling another high-profile job is going to get a lot of heat. And hey, the heroes just wrapped up a bunch of the ABB stuff. They'll have time and motive to come after you. I wouldn't put my head on the chopping block. I guess the only part of this that I kind of, oh yeah, 2 plus 4 times 5 pulled it forward. It was, Vale said, by the way, for 250k, I'm in, just saying. Yeah. But the only part of Greg's thing that I disagree with is that I actually think that post ABB, given the situation with the other 4 like major villain powers in the city, that the heroes might be even more tied up than usual. Just because of how like out of control things are getting like day one. But yeah, I mean, you're generally right, and it would put lots of heat on them for later, if nothing else. They would be like a remembered target kind of thing. Not that Clock Blocker's gonna forget the bank robbery anytime soon. Um, yeah, do we have any final thoughts on that stuff? Or any of this other crap? Because if not, I shall move on. And looking at the chapter again, skimming, what could I do? I wasn't able to think of an audience participation question, as always. But for 6.5 and 6.6, I guess a decent question would be, do you like the in media res, don't show the plans way that they just jump right into the action? Because I mean, I do. I think it works great, but I want to hear other people's takes on it. Let's formalize this. Talk about the effect on the chapters of the of skipping the planning scene and jumping straight into the action. There we go. Boom. Let's grab that and put it in the Discord before I forget, which could happen at any moment. Alright, I don't have outro music because I still didn't get intro and outro music for this arc yet. Maybe someday. Maybe 6 will never get any. Rip Arc 6. But I wanted to shout out Coag Music anyway. They're great. Love them. Lots of free music. And then I want to talk about Wildbow's Patreon. Patreon.com/Wildbow to support the author of the work. Full work can be found at parahumans.wordpress.com. And then we've got audioworm-rain, or oh my god, I always screw this one. It's audioworm.rain-online.org. And 2 plus 4 times 5 says Arc 6's outro song is 433, which I have to assume is some sort of silent song, because otherwise it doesn't fit. Oh, yes, the song that's just 4 minutes and 33 seconds of silence. Indeed, indeed. And then the last link being the Discord link, which you can find in the description. You guys are all great. Have a fun week. I'll see you again next week for 6.5 and 6.6. Bye!